after a up and down topsy-turvy window, which saw a monumental 2-0 victory over Mexico, followed by a result nobody was expecting, at least from the American side, a 1-1 draw against Jamaica. U.S. fans are suddenly in a weird spot right now. We've got a couple months to reflect before the next January window, and all of a sudden the margin for error is slimmed, and the reality of potentially not making another World Cup is starting to kind of show its face. On the flip side, the U.S. still has a huge opportunity in front of us with some very winnable games in order to make the World Cup. But the question is right now, what U.S. team are we right now? Are we the 2-0 team or are we the Jamaica team? I brought in a man to help me discuss that. He is Jason Davis. He is the host of the United States of Soccer. He is the co-host of the Best Soccer Show, one of the top guys in the game right now as far as talking about the U.S. men's national team. Jason, how are you feeling after the results of this window?
I'm better with the Yank Report vibes with the music, Sam. Really, it helps. I'm not kidding. Like, it's bringing my heart rate down. I'm feeling a little more chill right now. I appreciate you for that. I appreciate you bringing us back to level a little bit. It's been hard, right? And you said something before we jumped on here. You said a night's sleep really does change your perspective on this. And we are adjusting. We're having to figure out. We're zooming in on how to feel about this team. Even after Mexico, even after 2-0, even after maybe what was the best performance, certainly under Berhalter, probably in years. I mean, I don't know, Sam, you tell me if you can remember a better performance than that across 90 minutes. We still have this propensity to wildly swing the other way. And look, I know the points are not there yet, and 2022 looms with some interesting games. I'm trying to be very level about this. I'm trying to believe, because I think this group in particular has not yet hit its ceiling. It's young and it's talented, and there are going to be bumps along the way. I know we still have 2017, 2018 ringing in our ears when we think about this team. And that's why people might reject out of hand the notion that we should all be calm and that don't worry, we're going to get there. You know, I was quoting numbers on my radio show today that according to somebody who does data stuff, and I'm not a math guy, the United States is 96 point whatever percent to qualify for the World Cup. You know, it doesn't guarantee it, but it's a likelihood based on all the factors that they can crunch in the computer. So I think it's going to be fine, because that team in 2017, 2018 was on the wrong end of the spectrum age-wise. They had largely seen their better days behind them. This group is the exact opposite. Why not believe 2022 is going to be just a step above this, which should get us the points to qualify?
Hey, you bring up a few interesting points. I think the first one is there's two different ways to look at it, and I think John Johnstone in the chat has articulated this perfectly with his 1 point away from fourth, but also 1 point away from first.
Sure, that's how tight that is. Yeah, exactly.
Depending on how you want to view that glass, whether it's half full or half empty, is kind of how you're viewing the national team right now. But at the same time, man, I think there's a lot of us that came into this World Cup qualifying cycle hoping that things would be totally different, that this group of young, exciting players would kind of hit the ground running and just dominate all the way through. And we've seen that hasn't happened. We've seen that the team has gotten better game over game, especially at home. And you mentioned the Mexico game as the best game we've seen from the national team. And certainly in a competitive game, I think that's true. I think this was the best we've ever seen a U.S. national team play in a competitive game. But on the road, we still haven't seen it. We still haven't seen anything close to resembling what we've seen at home. And it has people worried. At the same time, you know, we're only, what would you say? Like, what are the guesstimates right now? About 7 points away from qualifying?
I think that's probably about right. I mean, I know the number 21 has gotten some run. It's also true that the top four have taken a lot of points off the bottom four, and that kind of stretches out and maybe makes that number a little bit higher. I think 24 gets you in almost guaranteed. So right now on 15, you need 9 points. Now, again, I can't predict the future, and I can't tell you that every performance at home against CONCACAF competition, not named Mexico, not named Canada, is going to be good. But they have 3 games against Central American opponents in 2022 at home. I mean, it matters what windows they are in and how the flow of this goes. But that first window, that window is right there for the taking, right? It's one where 7 points would feel okay. I mean, it's Canada away. We don't know exactly where that's going to be yet. But to the two home games in that window, which I think are the El Salvador and the Honduras games, you should win those games going away, right? You should win those games comfortably. You just talked about the home form being completely different than road form. So if that's 6 points, and you said 7, and I'm saying 9 to be sure, well, you only need 3 points from your final window. I mean, if there a win there, is Panama at home? Is that the kind of thing you feel confident about? The other ones are obviously Mexico away and Costa Rica away. Costa Rica away is a horror show for the United States, generally speaking. This is not the same Tico's team. Who knows? And Mexico, I'm not going to ever count on points in the Aztec. I'm just not going to do that no matter where Mexico is right now.
Yeah, and somebody said it well on Twitter. They said, if the U.S. can't beat Panama at home, do they really deserve to go to the World Cup?
Exactly.
It's one of those things. Like, if you're going to go to the World Cup, you're going to have to earn it. We're seeing a lot of teams in Europe right now that everybody thought were shoo-ins that are struggling right now because they're not getting results against lesser opponents. This is how it goes, man. You've got to get those results whenever you have those opportunities, and I think that's what makes some of these away games sting a little bit more, especially when you had opportunities that kind of got away. But the U.S. does have a huge opportunity in that next window. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves right now, but we don't really know what the U.S. men's national team is going to look like in that next window.
That's the concerning thing for me, Sam. Exactly. That's an issue. I mean, it's the same in every window, though, right? So far, the three that we've seen. Imperfect is the word that I keep coming back to. No matter what Berhalter does, and I know, look, there are some questions on the back end of the roster. You know, I know people are still saying, well, why is Leggett there? Why is Roldan there? I understand those criticisms, and I think they're probably fair. But there's, even on the front end of the roster, even in your starting 11, you're going to have an imperfect roster. I love that there are fans trying to be positive who are saying things like, well, we just beat Mexico and drew with Jamaica. And the first game, we had McKennie. The second game, we didn't. We were missing 5 starters in that Jamaica game. If you think about it, Dest and Reyna and McKennie and Pulisic didn't start, and Miles Robinson was missing. That's a good way to look at it. But probably when we get to January, there are going to be a couple of those guys, or a different set of guys, a different set of starters who are missing. And that is where the concern absolutely it raises to a level that I start thinking about it, and it might keep me up at night.
Yeah, and depth is a great point. I mean, I think that there's probably, I don't know, what would you say, 12, 13, 14 guys that were pretty comfortable with playing games in CONCACAF. But we saw once we got beyond that, I mean, the level of drop-off from Miles Robinson to Chris Richards, and from especially from Weston McKennie to Jean-Luc Abusio last night was massive. And we saw without Weston McKennie, this team looks different. There's some players that we've been able to get by without because we have some depth at like the winger position and maybe even the right back position. But boy, does this team play better with Serginho Dest and Weston McKennie and
these are the
all
margins.
those guys in the lineup.
Yeah, those are the fine margins, right? And look, we all know that if you pull Tyler Adams out of that lineup, it's like a drain, right? You pull the plug and everything goes down. Weston McKennie's not quite on that level, but it's not unlike that. And Busio, as much as I was clamoring for Busio to get the start, and I thought he was the right choice, he turned out not to be. Now, look, playing conditions, the way Jamaica played, but again, Berhalter's job, and certainly some of us were aware of what Jamaica was going to do against the U.S. Berhalter's job is to game plan and understand, okay, this is how Jamaica's going to play. After the game, I was distressed to hear him say they played direct and that caused us problems. What do you think they were going to do, Greg? Like, did you think they were not going to play direct? Because I knew they were going to play direct. Sam, you knew they were going to play direct. So if that's the issue, if that was going to cause you problems, and it certainly did Busio, right? Busio was non-existent in terms of recoveries, in terms of winning duels, and nothing. He gave us nothing. I think he's improved, and I certainly think tactically he's improved since moving to Italy, but he's not the athlete McKennie is, and that's, again, very much like Tyler Adams, the ground he covers. It seems as though the U.S. is dependent on that. So, I would say, I wasn't saying this, but in retrospect, especially with this roster, forgetting the fact that he called in this group and could have called in a couple of different players, maybe Kellen Acosta was the better choice. He might not have given as much on the attacking of the field. But then again, Busio didn't get a chance to really influence the game on that end of the field, except for a couple of moments.
Yeah, and I'll readily admit right now that I am a Busio stan. So this might be incredibly apologetic right now and incredibly soft on Busio, but I really felt like what we saw was Adams and McKinney looking to play direct, looking to get vertical, and looking to move upfield. Where Gianluca Busio, he's not that player.
No, he's got a pause in his game, right? And that's the problem with this group. And Berhalter has to know that. And if you're going to play him, well, then adjust for. I don't know how you necessarily do that.
Well, I think it takes time. I think asking. Yeah. I mean, in my heart of hearts, I definitely hope that Busio could walk on the field and it would just work. But I saw so many times where Busio would drop into that space where he does with his club squad, but Adams would bypass him, or Musa would just run upfield instead of giving Busio the ball and letting him do his Busio thing. And I think in the second half, they kind of started to give him the ball a little bit more, but in the first half, they certainly were not looking for him. And that's where I think this club has so many. I mean, this national team has so many young players, right? Gianluca Busio, I believe he's 19 years old right now. There's still other young teenagers that are potentially going to get integrated in this squad moving forward. The thought that I have is it's good to give Gianluca Busio 90 minutes in a CONCACAF qualifier away, even if he's not the absolute best player we could have had in the mix, so that maybe next time that we need him, he'll be a little bit more ready for that role. I think the same could be said for for Chris Richards, whenever he was able to get 90 minutes. What was it against Costa Rica? So in this moment where we needed him in this window, it wasn't his first appearance. Joe Scally is going to have that same thing. We hope Joe Scally hits the ground running with the national team, but we don't necessarily know that that's true. He's an 18-year-old.
This is the thing, Sam. It's so, as you talk through it, and I think we have maybe forgotten it, or just because we get normalized to this, it is such a wiping clean of the slate from the last cycle that it boggles the mind, right? And I mean, Walker Zimmerman's been a good player in this window for this team, and I think he's going to be an asset. He wasn't a featured player in that 2017-2018 team. Like, he wasn't involved in that cycle, even though he's a little bit older than this group. So his experience is it's conditional experience. It's MLS experience, it's professional experience. It's not international experience. So we are not only dealing with a young team, we're dealing with a very inexperienced team at every spot on the field. Every spot, except for DeAndre Yedlin. DeAndre, which I believe is why DeAndre Yedlin got it. Well, but John Brooks isn't here. That's, again, the point is that Berhalter has clearly, and I'm glad he's doing it, because I do think it'll serve the program well. Of course, we want a World Cup. We want to go to a World Cup next year, not just in 2026. But all of this, as you kind of point to, Chris Richards getting blooded, Gianluca Busio on the road in CONCACAF, that should get us to a point where, even if it doesn't come together, and I still think we're going to qualify for Qatar, but even if it doesn't come together exactly for Qatar, man, these guys, when they're 24, are going to be ready when the United States is hosting a World Cup. I hope so. I mean, I want to believe that.
Yeah, I think my formula is always about 4 games. I think it takes about 4 games for a new player to really play well. I mean, we saw Tim Weah whenever he hit the national team, at least in World Cup qualifiers. He does not look like the Tim Weah that he's looked like recently, right? Like, he's come into form. Even Gio Reyna, his first game with the national team was okay, but it took him a little while before he got to the point where he was commanding the ball and just being that ferocious Gio Reyna that we know and love. And I think you speak to, I think there's 2 different ways to look at the national team right now. Generally 2 different ways to look at a lot of things in life. You've got the way that we as U.S. men's national team super fans look at it, where it's game by game, kick by kick, minute by minute, moment by moment, questioning every single decision and, blowing up every result. And that's how we do things. But then there's also the 30,000 foot way of looking at things. And that 30,000 foot way of looking at things is taking in the enormity of the project, which is, like you said, an experiment that I'm not sure a lot of countries have to go through, which is we've got to put together a brand new national team, a team that's never played together. Oh, by the way, there's going to be a global pandemic where this squad isn't going to get minutes together for a long period of time. So they're going to get a handful of games before World Cup qualifying starts, and then off you go. And, oh, by the way, there's going to be new players integrated into that group. So it's just going to be a constant blooding in, and it's just a difficult process of throwing players together. and just hoping that it works right away.
And the fact that this is a coach who's learning on the fly as
Yeah.
well, and you can throw that at the Fed. I don't want to open up the interview process can of worms on your show, Sam, but this was my frustration with the year that passed between the failure to qualify for 2018 and Berhalter actually taking the job. Okay, if Berhalter's the guy, and I wasn't thrilled about it, right? I'm pragmatic at this point. I don't think you changed Greg Berhalter. I don't think Greg
No.
Berhalter being fired now makes any sense. This is the guy we're going to roll with at least for a little while longer. So I want him to do well, but I didn't like the process. I didn't like the way the Fed handled it. I didn't like the fact that they were sitting on their hands, letting Dave Sarakin do all this grunt work, which, Dave did a great job. But it could have been better if the same guy who was going to lead them into qualifying was leading them back then. We're going to wait for Greg Berhalter. Okay, whatever. Nepotism, I don't know. He's got to learn too. And I do think we've seen at least some small steps forward in evolution for Greg Berhalter. It's not just about what I expect or what I want out of him. It's about his ability to get the results on the field. And, we have seen an inability to put good back-to-back games together, which is a problem, right? That's definitely an issue. But what we have seen is that he seems more confident of picking the first 11. He's tinkering a little bit less with that group. Now, maybe he didn't get his substitutions right last night. That's certainly an argument. But against Mexico, it's hard to fault him for anything he did there. Obviously, we saw the beginning of that process when he got it right in the second half against Honduras. So, maybe we can hope, right? Like maybe we can hope that that's what's coming in 2022, a more confident and less tinkery Greg Berhalter.
I think that's what we all hope, man. And let me just jump in to say, Jay Greg says apparently Musa was playing with strep throat last night. Not sure where I heard that, so take that with a grain of salt. Would explain why he was a little off. Greg Berhalter said that in his post-game press conference. So I was very critical of taking off Musa. I thought that he was like the most effective midfielder. But hearing that, I guess, young man's health's got to come into account at some point. So yeah, that was kind of crazy to hear.
Well, and see, that's another thing that's hard, Sam. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a parent. I don't know, maybe because I'm a little bit older than I used to be. I want to at least give some benefit of the doubt. Like, it only goes so far, but we don't know in the moment things like that. We don't know that Musa is carrying strep throat and dealing with strep throat and trying to play an intense soccer match in a human environment. We don't know exactly what went down in training. I mean, I'm going to bring Joe Scally up first for a second. I'm excited to see Joe Scally get an opportunity to play. I'm ready for him to get a chance. I'm not going to go crazy about him not playing in this window because I don't know what his integration was like. I don't know what he looked like in training. I don't, Berhalter says nice things, but he says nice things about everybody because I think he's building everybody up. So what are we supposed to do? Like, oh, Greg, you're wrong when I don't know if Joe Scally looked trash in training because it's his first time and he's nervous. It's hard to know.
Yeah. And I mean, Joe Scally is a great shout because as we head into January, we saw a performance from Anthony Robinson that was just not good, right? I mean, one of the poor performances on the night for any American. And, Anthony Robinson is a player that I had been critical of coming into World Cup qualifying. And all of a sudden in World Cup qualifying, he just turned around and looked like electric left back. And then somehow in the last two games, I don't know what's happened to Anthony Robinson, but it's going to be interesting to see if Joe Scally can push him for that position in January.
Yeah, so I definitely think that the door has to be open for somebody else to take minutes at left back. That was absolutely evident. I mean, Andy Robinson was the worst American player on the field against Mexico, and they didn't win in spite of him, but he didn't exactly help that effort, right? He had a couple of nice moments. I think he had a cutback cross that maybe could have found somebody that wasn't bad, but otherwise he kind of missed with everything. He was giving the ball away all over the place. Happened to get against Jamaica. Just for a second on Andy Robinson, again, I think it's still part of that young player ups and downs, not leveling things out. I mean, when we get upset about a coach going with an older player who has a lower ceiling, what the coach is thinking is, I can be comfortable that he's going to put in a good performance or a reasonably good performance. He might not be the best player on the field, and he may not outshine everybody, and he may not take the game over, but I can trust that he's going to have this level that as a group will help us maybe win a game. Whereas if you go with a young player, and maybe it's Robinson, certainly a lot of these other young guys, you may get an incredible performance out of them, but you also might get a really bad performance that will bring the whole team down. So I think Robinson, the team level got to a point against Mexico where it didn't matter. It was maybe more of an issue yesterday, although there were other things happening in the middle of the field, especially. Yeah, maybe it's Joe Scally. Although it would be nice to have a truly natural left back step in and challenge Anthony Robinson, because Sam
How long have we been
Vines,
saying that?
George Bello, I'm not feeling those guys yet.
Yeah, and you mentioned having a veteran at the left back position, but who is that guy at this point? Like, I think Anthony Robinson is the oldest of the group. Whenever you consider Sam Vines, George Bello, and Joe Scally, I mean, you got a teenager, I think a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old, and how old is Anthony Robinson? Like 24 or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's 23, 24, probably about that.
Yeah, so come January, there's going to be a lot of interesting position battles for these players. Maybe we have John Brooks coming back into the squad. Walker Zimmerman has looked as good as anybody else over this window, so it'd be difficult to take him out. I see Joe Wass says, to be honest, they developed a long-term project. You see there's so much room to do still, but they should be on the right track. And yeah, I feel like, if I'm honest, they are on the right track. I think that the team is getting better. The big question, and I think this goes back to Greg Berhalter, one of the big criticisms about Greg Berhalter over World Cup qualifying was that, if you just put the right guys in the squad's going to do well. And then we saw against Jamaica, he put out the squad that everybody wanted to see, and it didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to. So I wonder, like, what are your thoughts on as far as like the narrative surrounding Greg Berhalter? Where do you think he's at within the fans? It seems like there's a lot of fans that just aren't ever going to accept him. But
I don't. I mean, I think that there are definitely fans of the national team who will never give Greg Berhalter the benefit of the doubt. They'll always say, well, he's an MLS coach who never won anything. And look, that's a fact, right? He never won anything. He comes from MLS. Mm-hmm. There's also that inconvenient fact that his brother used to work for the Federation at the time that he was hired. I understand all those things. I don't think that Greg Berhalter is dumb, and I do think that we can already see that he is a good man manager for this group, right? He's not rah-rah. He's not fire and brimstone. You probably don't need that with a young team. You probably need a guy who's going to bring them along and sort of cajole them and nudge them out there. You push the baby bird off so they can fly, that kind of stuff. That's who Greg Berhalter is. He's not, but that also means that he doesn't exude this passion, and therefore it doesn't feel like he cares as much as we care. And then when things go wrong, and I see John or somebody here in the chat saying things like, oh, he's making excuses, he's feeding into the narrative that CONCACAF World Cup qualifying on the road is hard. First of all, I think historically it's proven it kind of is, but I think that's all kind of just part of the psychology that Berhalter brings to the table. It doesn't mean he's a great tactician, and it doesn't mean he's great with squad selection. And maybe there's a perfect coach out there who's good in all three of those areas. I don't think the U.S. can find that person right now. So what we're all should be hoping for, whatever you feel about Greg Berhalter, is that he does learn those things and applies them to this team and gets us qualified. Because that's the only road that's available right now.
I think, there's a lot of cliches out there as far as coaching and bringing new players into a squad. You might say tactics are important. You might say game time is important. You might say experience is important. And if you look at this U.S. squad, I mean, we don't have any of those things, right?
No.
None of these players have experience. They don't have a ton of game time together. There's a lot of young players. There's a lot of young players experiencing CONCACAF away for the first time. We saw that with Busio last night. And it's just like, pick your poison. Like, which ready-made excuse do you want to take? Because they're all there and they're all valid.
Some of them don't even have a lot of game time with their clubs either. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I give Berhalter credit. It took him a little while, and I know there was consternation over the Nations League handling of Yunus Musa. I think Greg always knew he was committed, and so that was not an issue. And, maybe he could have given him some more time there and gotten him ready. But he plays Yunus Musa. It's pretty clear he sees Yunus Musa as a starter in this team in their most important games, despite the fact that A, he doesn't play in that position all that often for Valencia, and B, he doesn't play that much for Valencia. So, we're clamoring for things that really are pushing the envelope of what any manager would do. And in some cases, Berhalter is accepting that things are going to be imperfect, as I said, and still going with players who maybe deserve the opportunity despite not checking all the boxes. That's the thing that I think stands out for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, the topic of this video, or the title of this video, is all about CONCACAF away. It's an issue that the U.S. has had traditionally, and it's an issue that we're having right now. Now, we saw last night just one of the classic, I think, CONCACAF soccer games ever, which was the the Canada versus Mexico game. And it looks like we've got a new contender in the North, and they're puffing their chest out, and they're talking their smack because they're at the top of World Cup qualifying, and they deserve to talk all the smack they want. They're the new kid on the block. They went into Azteca. They got a point. They're looking great right now. But I think the bigger question is all the gamesmanship that goes into a CONCACAF away game. Like, we've heard all the horror stories about going down to South America, and the wake up calls in the middle of the night, the DJs playing in the streets, just doing everything that you can, playing on these terrible pitches, not watering the grass, sloppy grass, whatever, just anything you can do to get an advantage. I'm wondering, like, are you a fan of these things? Were you a fan of what you saw last night in Canada? Or would you prefer, like, more or less the way the U.S. goes about it, where we, for the most part, tend to play on pretty well-manicured grass and fairly well-infrastructured areas?
Let's be fair. So the U.S. takes its advantages just in a different form, maybe. I mean, certainly Cincinnati was manipulated so that Mexico would be very much the away team. And we know that that's very hard to do when Mexico plays in the United States. And I give credit to the Mexico fans for being willing to show up wherever and pay whatever. U.S. soccer has to be very conscious of that. I mean, Canada playing in the snow, it's not ideal. I am sort of a purist. I want to see the game played in the best possible conditions. You know, the best version of the sport is the Champions League, and you're never going to see a knockout round Champions League game on a crap field in inclement weather. It's just not going to happen, right? That's also because it's a product and they're selling it. And they want us to watch and they want to make as much money as possible. But I think there's room in the game for gamesmanship. I do think it's part of the culture of the sport. And, there's a line probably, but I don't think that Canada crossed it. I don't think that trying to wake up players in a hotel in the middle of the night crosses it, or pulling fire alarms crosses it. Probably throwing bodily fluids crosses it a little bit. But this is what makes it's Western Hemisphere. It's not just us, obviously, Common Bowl as well. It's Western Hemisphere soccer is a different vibe. And maybe it doesn't always, at least in CONCACAF, really prepare us to play some of these other, top nations. I don't know. Culturally, I think we fall behind, and that's where our biggest problem is. And maybe one day we'll get there. But it is special. Like, it is memorable. It is an experience. We do get to talk about, what the Azteca is like for the United States when they go there. We used to, again, Canada is a good team right now, and they may have beaten Mexico in a fair, square match on a neutral ground. Who knows? They might have beaten Mexico on a neutral ground. But they added to that, right? And they added to the lore of their program, and now they'll always have guys jumping into snowbanks and Fonzie Davis running around with the flag in 12-degree weather, whatever that is. I mean, he had to keep moving. Otherwise, he would have frozen in place, I think is what happened there.
Yeah, how many times have you seen someone score a goal and then throw snow into the air? It just doesn't happen all that often. Now, the other big thing that makes CONCACAF is the officiating. Like, we know, especially whenever we go down to the Central America areas, that what we might perceive to be a yellow card or even a red card in most of world soccer is, sometimes you're lucky to get a whistle. And I think we saw that for sure in Jamaica last night, where there was more than their fair share of challenges that should have been yellows, at least could have been reds, and I think that hugely affected the game. By the time Christian Pulisic comes in, the ref had let it degrade to the point of where it was like an MMA match, and the Jamaicans could just destroy Pulisic whenever he got on the ball, and it was pretty rough. And a big part of that is because of the way that refereeing assignments work and the federations that exist within CONCACAF. So you're getting these officials that are used to reffing games in much smaller leagues, and then you're throwing them into a game where it's much faster, there's much more on the line, it's a little bit nastier, and they're just, I don't know how you could expect them to rise to that occasion. Yeah. But the big question moving forward is VAR's coming into play in January. Mm-hmm. And the thing I'm seeing for so many U.S. men's national team fans is like, VAR is going to save us. Like, VAR is going to change all this. And the thing I know is, like, VAR doesn't exist in a lot of these countries that this federation, that the refs are coming from. So their first experience with VAR might be during World Cup qualifying reffing games for the U.S. And we
Yeah.
saw all across Europe, whenever VAR came rolling out, that initial stages, it was just not good. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on what we can expect in January whenever VAR rolls out.
Yeah, I'm very concerned. Now, I think I might get slapped with an anti-VAR label just because my issue generally with VAR, where there's a possibility of getting some calls right, right? Mexico had a ball cleared off the line yesterday. I don't think it crossed the line. It didn't look like it crossed the line, but let's say that it had and they hadn't given the goal. Obviously, VAR would come back and it would correctly award a goal to Mexico, and it changes the game and it awards them fairly for what they did. That kind of clear black and white decision, I'm for fixing that. So many of the calls in this sport that we love so much are subjective. They are ultimately down to a human's opinion of something that happened. Now, look, there are lines, obviously. If I go in 2-footed and I'm aiming for your jewels, you're probably going to pull a red card, right? But if it's, oh, how late was he? Super slow-mo. Did he leave his leg in? Where are his studs? Those things can be kind of adjudicated either way. So all I think VAR mostly does is kick the can down the road. It just moves it up another level and adds time to the process of making a decision. Handballs right now are such a mess. Is a ball off his shoulder when he's in the box, but he's moving his arm out and all this stuff. It just bothers me that we think it's going to fix a lot of things that really aren't fixable. Now you throw it into CONCACAF halfway through the process because it's CONCACAF and whatever. Why do something well when you can do it half-ass? And as you said, Sam, that's the biggest issue. The only referees in the region, as far as I'm aware, well, I guess Mexican referees probably do too. I think they're using VAR in Mexico. Yeah. Mexican referees, MLS referees. They cannot referee every match, right? Referees from those two federations cannot referee every match. They certainly can't referee Mexico games and U.S. games when one of those teams is involved. So we may be in for a complete crap show. It just may be terrible with this. And again, what I think fans should do is pray that we don't get screwed, not the other way around.
Yeah, speaking of getting screwed, man, CM James says the Jamaican goal yesterday would have probably stood. And there was a lot of Jamaicans that left comments on my channel saying that, like, we paid off the refs and everything. Okay. And I just thought the irony, considering, like, the tackles that were purple during the game, purple cards that just went.
And that's why I don't get wrapped up in that. Like, oh, we would have lost the game if they'd given the goal. It was a good goal. There was no foul there. First of all, again, we cannot see every single angle. It doesn't look like a foul on the video that we saw, but you cannot see every single angle. Yeah. All right. And Walker Zimmerman had been winning balls in the air all day long. Suddenly he can't get 3 inches off the ground to go win that ball. I don't know. Just saying. Then you mentioned the card or the possibility of cards earlier in the game, which certainly would have changed the way they defended the Americans, even if they don't get another card, even if one of those isn't a red, even if they're not down to 10 men. Jamaica's got to be more careful. And then just the fact that this is what I think people get wrong about VAR. If that ball is whistled as a disallowed goal for Jamaica, if that goal is disallowed, and then the referee says, I think you should look at that. First of all, there's no guarantee the referee is going to change his mind based on what he saw. If his decision, right? He's not going to necessarily change his mind based on a replay of the live action he just witnessed. That is still a subjective call. And there's not even a guarantee that the referee in the booth is going to say that meets the standard for clear and obvious, because he maybe doesn't see all the angles, right? We just saw this in an MLS game. They were wrong, but Justin Glad got away with a handball because the referee in the booth said, well, based on what I see, the ref on the field couldn't have known, and therefore it's not clear and obvious. It's the wrong call. But that's what VAR creates, those opportunities for somebody to make a subjective decision and go, oh, no, that's still not a goal. Or give that because, I don't know, it's blowing this way instead of that way.
Yeah, and the other factor, of course, is going to be the quality of the cameras in the stadium. And last night in Jamaica, the production was just not that good. I think we saw like 2 different angles of that replay, and neither of them were the angle that we wanted to see. So there's just a lot hanging on that.
I want to move on. Save us. That's all. That's what you said. It's not going to save us.
It's going to be a new brand of nuttiness.
Yeah, and I know I've got, this is the old man shaking his fist at the cloud take. I got it. I know where I'm at.
So we mentioned January that there's going to be a big change in the national team, and we didn't really get into that. So I kind of want to get into that right now. January, whenever the new qualifiers are going to come around, there's going to be, or at least potentially, there's going to be a huge influx of change in this national team. A national team that pretty much the only constant at this point is change. We're going to have a lot of that. There's potential transfers for guys like Matthew Hoppy's rumored to be on the move from Mallorca. Tyler Adams is rumored to be on the move. Weston McKennie's rumored to be on the move. All of a sudden, Christian Pulisic has a rumor out there that he could potentially be on the move. Then we've got guys like maybe Caden Clark is going to make that move. We've got Ricardo Pepi, who's supposed to be making a move. There's a lot of players within the starting 11 that are going to be in new situations. And then you have the whole other caveat of the MLS players who are going to be at the end of the season. So how are we going to handle this huge shakeup that we're going to be experiencing in January?
Well, this is why, even if I'm critical of the guy on a regular basis, I don't want Greg Berhalter's job because I don't think this is going to be easy. I mean, so let's look at the lineup that started last night. It started against Mexico. Actually, that's better because Weston was in there, obviously, and Miles Robinson was in there. DeAndre Yedlin's going to stay put. I mean, he might not be the starting right back when we get to January. That was a choice made by Berhalter that could go a couple different ways. Walker Zimmerman's not going anywhere. As good as he's been in MLS, he's going to be an MLS player. That's a problem. Again, as you said, he'll have been out of season. I mean, they're in the playoffs, but by the time we get to January,
let me pause you right there. Let me ask. We've seen in the past MLS players take loans to Europe, especially before a World Cup window.
Yeah.
If you're Jordan Morris, if you're Aaron Long, if you're Walker Zimmerman, Miles Robinson, maybe even Matt Turner, why would you not take a loan at this point?
Okay. I suppose you could do that. Now, because of the window, you can't get there until January 1st. How long is it going to be before the manager there says, okay, you're going to play for us? I mean, if it's right away, if you're almost guaranteed playing time, go do it. Absolutely. But I don't think that's always the case, right? And then you are less than a month away from camp for the U.S. men's national team going into that last week of January with the first game and into February. So 27th, 30th, and the 2nd, right? Those are the games. I don't know. Is that worth it? I mean, again, maybe if it's the more intense training environment. But then again, Berhalter's going to put together an extended camp in January ahead of that window. So is it better to be maybe at an English championship club for Walker Zimmerman or somebody in MLS and maybe get a game or two in that month? Or is it better to be in camp with Berhalter working on whatever you can before the European guys arrive? I don't know. Sam, do you know?
Well, I think the big thing is ultimately you want a seat on that plane, right? You want to be heading to Qatar, assuming that the U.S. is able to handle business and qualify for the World Cup. And if I'm someone who's on the bubble, which might be Jordan Morris. Jordan Morris is looking for a way back in, and I'm wondering, even if he's absolutely lights out in Seattle at the start of the MLS season, does that resume get him ahead of anybody on that winger position or potentially striker position? Same thing could be said for Aaron Long. Even if he's absolutely lights out, does that give him put him ahead of other people? And even Walker Zimmerman, there's a few guys in that center back position right now that could potentially pass him up. So if you're one, or Paul Arriola is another one. People aren't going to like that, but Paul Arriola, Sebastian Lletget, guys who were potentially on the bubble of that roster. What do you have to lose as far as getting that loan and trying to make this roster?
No, you're probably right. It's just that the time frame is so compressed that it makes it difficult to know. If that's something that you should be chasing. And I imagine that Berhalter is going to have a lot of input for these guys. And I mean, obviously, you have to work out a loan. You have to find somebody who wants you. Your MLS team has to agree to that. Now, in most cases, we know because MLS works in lockstep with the national team. That's usually not an issue, but you never know. I mean, somebody could put their foot down. There are a couple of clubs that don't like it when their players. I mean, I don't know that Atlanta, who has famously not released Miles Robinson for U23 games, I don't know if they're suddenly going to be like, yeah, Miles, go off and train in or play in England where you could potentially get hurt before you come back for our 2022 MLS season. I don't know. I don't know the answer to those questions, and I think they're complicating factors for everything that Berhalter is doing here. And again, we talked about center back. You hope that Chris Richards is still getting tons of time and playing well at Hoffenheim. That's going to be necessary. Obviously, John Brooks could be back into that team at that point. Where if Miles doesn't go to anywhere, could go to Europe on loan, does he have the sharpness for Berhalter to trust him even at home against El Salvador. I mean, you can't take that game for granted, right? So, yeah, I mean, I don't. MLS guys are going to be out of season. Some of the European guys would be making moves, could potentially be in new teams. That could keep them from getting minutes right away. Sharpness is going to be a factor in that January, February window.
And that doesn't just affect the U.S., of course. There's a lot of the other CONCACAF teams have players in MLS. Canada has a bunch of players in MLS, so that'll be affecting them as well. I'm very curious. I think we're getting close to wrapping this up, but I'm very curious as we look ahead to this January window. Suddenly, the game theory comes way back into play, where the U.S. has 2 games at home that are absolutely, positively, absolutely must win. Have to win those 2 games at home against inferior opponents, and then right smack dab in the middle, we've got to go away to Canada. And I'm assuming that Canada is going to be taking the approach that that's an absolute must, 3 points for them. So if you're Greg Berhalter, are we going to see a situation like we saw maybe for the Panama game where you load up your guns for the first game and the third game, and in the middle, you kind of just put out what you can? Or what's going to happen in that window?
Yeah. Well, this is the hard part, right? Like, we want the best team to play in every single game. We certainly don't want to concede to Canada, just go up there and throw in, again, a la Panama, and just give away points. But you have to win the home games. Those are very winnable games, whereas Canada right now, top of the group, is clearly a very tough team. Regardless of what group he puts out in Canada, I don't think that's going to be a pretty game from an American perspective. Like, you're going to make some choices. Does Weston McKennie play against El Salvador, Canada, and Honduras? Probably not, right? So does he play against El Salvador? That might be the easiest of the 3 games, but can you really kind of take that one easier and then maybe risk dropping 2 points? Then you have a disaster. Now you have to go to Canada, play your best team. But again, this is the same thing that came up in those first 2 windows. I think he has to target victories in the first and third, which definitely means there's going to be some rotation in the second, which might not set up great for the game against Canada and Canada. And I don't think I could blame him if he does that, as much as it's going to kill us as fans. If they beat El Salvador, lose to Canada, and beat Honduras, we won't feel satisfied with that. We'll feel like we left 3 points or maybe an extra point on the table.
Yeah, I'm predicting an absolute meltdown in January whenever fans see the lineup for that Canada game, because I know, myself included, everybody wants to go up to Canada and give them what they got coming to them, right? Like, we want to put a hurting on them in their home stadium, whether it's the ice.
But bragging rights don't get you to the World Cup, right?
Absolutely. I mean, those 3 points at home are an absolute must. So I definitely see a world in which the U.S. has that B team against Canada. But at the same time, if we ever get all the players healthy that could potentially contribute to this roster, the second roster is not too shabby, right? Like, we've got
that's
some
what
players.
we haven't seen. That's what we haven't seen. We haven't seen, not just have we not seen the perfect first 11, we also haven't seen the depth come to bear. But then again, we just talked through the complications because of some of the offseason issues, loan issues, playing time issues, transfer issues. This is what I mean by imperfect. Are we going to get to that January window and he is going to have his first two choices at most of those positions? Probably not, because it hasn't happened yet, right? We still haven't gotten Pulisic, Reyna, Adams, McKennie. We haven't got them all on the field together, right? And Musa, that is the dream thing, and we're still dreaming. Like, we're still hoping for that rather than having talked about, well, look how great this is. We don't even know. And we already talked, Sam, about one of those factors, one of those kind of built-in excuses that we don't want to lean on, being game time together. They don't have it. They don't have it.
Yeah, and we saw that with Busio against Jamaica, where it just didn't work, man. I think the biggest joke in U.S. soccer is anytime someone asks, like, what's your best 11? Because it's like, I mean, that's like saying, like, what's your favorite unicorn? Like, I don't know if I've ever seen that ever, especially with this new group of players. But that being said, we did get a ton of minutes with the MMA midfield in this window. We did bring in Busio. We did bring in Chris Richards. So I feel like there's at least we might have 4 center backs that I'm okay with if we consider John Brooks, Miles Robinson, Walker Zimmerman, and Chris Richards. And that back line, I thought DeAndre Yedlin had a pretty good window. much better than my expectations. I thought he was going to be awful. He was much better than I was expecting.
I think him playing in Turkey is a big boost for this national. Him actually playing games is a big boost for this national team. Even though we thought we had a ton of depth at right back, clearly Reggie's situation has gone south. Serginho Dest is a great player on the attacking of the field, leaves a lot to be desired. Clearly injury is an issue for him. And look, Joe Scally may come on and we may not have this issue quite as much, but to have DeAndre Yedlin in form is a great thing.
Yeah, and that front line is looking great. I mean, if we ever get the 4 horsemen together and to ride together, that would be wonderful. And Gio Reyna, Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, and Brendan Aronson. That striker position continues to be a question mark. I'm still comfortable with Pepe. I know he's another player that's 18 years old that we got to ride with. He could potentially get that move. Yeah.
Because Berhalter, Jesus Ferreira deserved a chance, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. But he's obviously not a center forward with, back to goal center forward, clearly. And it's not that you can't play in a different way, but it would be nice to have somebody who can replicate that skill set and step in. And it's just like every one of these guys that we thought maybe was going to be there is either in terrible form or not playing enough.
Yeah.
Same thing.
It's frustrating because it's something that you could have easily predicted. Going down to Jamaica, needing a goal late in the game, the referee has got his whistle in his pocket. The Jamaicans are just out physicaling us left and right. And then who do you bring on late in the game? Jesus Ferreira. That would have been a moment where
where's Eddie Johnson when you need him, Sam? Where's Eddie Johnson when you need him?
Where's Daryl DK, right? You bring in Daryl DK into that game, you feel a little bit more confident. Then again, our fullbacks were not putting crosses anywhere near the box. I mean, we were just kicking balls into the stands left and right. Jason, I think we covered a lot of ground today. There's a lot going on with this national team. There's a lot of soccer left to be played. Depending on how you want to view this, I mean, we're 1 game away from first place. We're 1 game away from fourth place. It looks, for all the world right now, it looks like the U.S. is going to be in that top 4, right? I don't think there's anybody saying that we're going to drop out of that top 4. The question is, are we going to be finishing first, or are we going to end up in that playoff? It feels like it's going to be one or the other. There's nobody that's saying like we're going to be second, we're going to be third.
It's all over the map. It's all over the map. And watching Mexico, by the way, Mexico, who has a very favorable second half or second 6 games of their schedule left. They have 4 of those at home. Mexico is freaking out, and as they always do when things go slightly wrong for them. Is Tata Martino going to be in charge when we get to January? I mean, I think preaching patience is very hard, but it's kind of where we're at because the United States is still in a position that if they just take care of those home games, they're probably going to qualify for the World Cup. It would take a miracle for them not to. Now, again, I don't want to just guarantee victories at home. That's not how this works. You still got to go out and win the games. But history tells us that they'll be pretty good against El Salvador, Honduras. Panama may be a little bit tougher, but they don't usually lose to Panama at home. So, I'm going to let myself feel pretty comfortable as we go into the holiday season. Sam, that's my Christmas gift to myself.
And the big question mark is Panama. Everybody is waiting for Panama to start losing games. Though I wonder, of that big 3 we talk about in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, if Mexico is the one that I would least want to be right now, considering the age of that squad and considering some of the performances that they've had. It looks like, from my outsider opinion, that they've got to get younger in a hurry, and that's not something that they're eager to do.
A friend of mine, Ryan Rosenblatt, said on Twitter that Mexico looks like the U.S. team from the last cycle. Now, I think Mexico's still going to qualify because what he said is, the ceiling was higher. When you have Herrera in midfield, when you've got a player like Raul Jimenez, that's obviously a higher level than what the U.S. was dealing with back in 2017. But it does feel like that, right? They're at the end of something, and they haven't yet ticked over. As nice as Chucky Lozano is, they need 4 or 5 more of him across the field in order to feel good about where they're going.
Yeah, and Chucky got CONCACAF last night, man. He took a body check in like the opening 2 minutes of that game, had a bruised eye. That was, CONCACAF is a wild place. Jason, thank you so much for coming on today. Can you take a minute to tell everybody where they can see your content?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you want the free stuff, it's The Best Soccer Show. We're on YouTube as well, but we got the podcast version. You can download that. And I'm on the radio every day on the United States of Soccer on Sirius XM FC. That's 12 to 3 Eastern time. It's all American stuff. I mean, if you want national team coverage, we're going to be there. Now, we'll mix in some other things, MLS, lower division stuff, U.S. women's national team, NWSL, but there's a lot of national team stuff there. So come check that out.
And Mike Hunt has a parting question for you. How many scarves do you have, and how many came from Roughneck Scarves?
I think the last count on scarves is 65-ish, something like that. I don't think they're all up at the moment. This is my little cubby. I don't know that I have a lot of Roughneck scarves. I mean, I probably do, but I don't really take notice of the maker of the scarf when I get them. And lots of these are gifts. They were all sent to me by various teams. Some teams that don't even exist. City Islanders, they don't exist anymore. Nashville Soccer Club over here, this logo, that's a dead logo. I mean, Louisville City's changed. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's my
you got some dead stock.
All
right, and the last question that I ask everyone, whenever it's game day and you're at home, do you have any superstitions or anything like that? Any rituals that you do on game day?
I'm mildly superstitious, but I don't think I have any rituals. I did determine, so I have a Waldo that I wore on Friday night when the U.S. played Mexico, and I noted to myself, oh, we whooped Mexico 2-0. This is the lucky shirt. And then last night I didn't go back to the shirt. I don't know why. I went with this shirt that I have from Tifosi Football, which is
so you were the problem.
I ruined it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna remember to put the jersey back on. It's just that it's authentic, and at my age you gotta work to stay tight, and so I gotta feel good about myself to wear it. But maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a confidence thing for the U.S. men's national team. I gotta project that confidence for them to go out and win.
I'll tell you what, I did my part. I went through all of my rituals and superstitions. I knocked them all out. So I came to the table to play the squad.
I'm the weak link.
So.
Yeah.
Jason,
don't call me up, Greg.
Thank you so much for coming on, guys. Thank you so much for all the comments and for hitting the like button, for subscribing. If you want to become a member, you can have access to some badges and some behind-the-scenes content. Shout out to Manuel Oliveras. I saw him in the chat earlier. He's a Tier 2 member. Guys, thank you so much for watching. My name is Sam, and this is The Yank Report.